I stood in front of the mirror, the soft lighting of the bathroom casting a golden hue over my skin. The dress clung to my body like it had been made just for me. Rich crimson, silky, unapologetically bold. I had bought it months ago, tucked it away for a night when I needed to feel alive again. Tonight felt like that night. A little too much cleavage, a little too high on the thigh, and just the right amount of danger in the way it shimmered. I loved it. Behind me, I heard the floorboards creak. I didn't turn. I was too focused on my eyeliner pulling the wing out just enough to match the mood. From the reflection, I saw him leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, a smirk already forming on his lips. "That dress is a bit much, don't you think?" The words were casual, tossed like a joke, but his eyes weren't laughing. They scanned me like I was a performance he'd seen too many times. I let the silence hang as I capped the eyeliner and reached for my lipstick. Deep red, the kind that stains more than lips. My hand didn't even tremble. I'd stopped giving him that power weeks ago. "Maybe it is," I said, voice light, lips curling into a practiced smile. "But I like it." He snorted. "Right." That was it. No compliment. No, "You look stunning." Just indifference, dressed up in sarcasm. We used to get ready together, laugh in the mirror, sneak kisses in between fixing our hair. But that had faded. Now it was tension and clipped words. The quiet war we never declared, but always fought. I grabbed my bag, sprayed a little jasmine on my neck, and stepped past him. He didn't stop me. He didn't say goodbye. I didn't give him the satisfaction of asking why. On the elevator ride down, I stared at my reflection in the glossy chrome. Maybe the dress was too much, but so was silence. So was settling. So was being invisible in your own relationship. I stepped out into the city night, heels clicking with purpose. I left with red lips and a broken heart. It started with a book. Of course it did. That kind of serendipity only happens in stories, but sometimes real life mimics fiction in the sweetest ways. I was thumbing through a worn copy of Baldwin's Giovanni's Room at a tiny used bookstore, tucked between a laundromat and a tie place. It was raining. I remember because the scent of old paper and petrichor still takes me back to that moment. He reached for the same book. Our fingers brushed and we both laughed, awkward, polite. He said something about Baldwin being dangerous reading if you're already in your feelings. I smiled and said, "Aren't we always?" That's how it began. He bought the book. I bought coffee. We sat in the corner of the cafe across the street and talked like we'd known each other in a past life. It was effortless. No fumbling, no small talk. He had these eyes that danced when he laughed, and I found myself searching for ways to make him do it again and again. The way he sipped his cappuccino, the curve of his lips when he got excited about a story, every bit of him felt familiar and thrilling all at once. We didn't say we were gay, not right away, but it hung in the air between us, gently obvious. We both spoke in that slightly coded way queer people do when we're testing the waters. He talked about an ex named Ryan. I nodded, smiled, and shared something about a disastrous first date with a guy who couldn't stop quoting Drag Race. We both laughed. There it was. Confirmation, connection, chemistry. That night, we stayed until the cafe closed. We moved to a park bench under the street lamp, still talking. My fingers were cold, and he offered me his scarf. It smelled like bergamot and something soft. I never gave it back. It wasn't long before we were inseparable. Mornings turned into afternoons, turned into entire weekends spent tangled in sheets and stories. We cooked together, read to each other, made playlists like teenagers. Everything. Felt like discovery. His laugh in the shower, the way he'd fall asleep mid-sentence, how his hand always found mine in public, like a reflex. It was a golden phase, where every touch was magic and every silence was comfortable. We built something, or at least it felt like we did. I trusted him with the fragile parts of me. He saw the parts of me I still hadn't said out loud. We were not perfect, but we were safe. And for a while, that was everything. Now, looking back, I wonder when the shift began, when sweetness turned to silence, when we stopped holding hands just because. But in those early days, under soft lights and coffee steam, I believed in us. Completely. That's what makes everything else hurt the way it does. Because we weren't just a relationship. We were a love story. Or at least, I thought we were. It didn't happen all at once. That's the trick with slow unravelings. They're quiet, almost graceful, like a thread slipping free from the hem of your favorite sweater. You don't notice the damage until it's halfway undone. At first, it was little things. He didn't laugh at my jokes like he used to. Or if he did, it was a breath of air through his nose, a twitch at the corner of his mouth. More politeness than delight. He started coming home later, claiming deadlines, late meetings, creative blocks. I believed him, or maybe I wanted to. Then came the comments. Subtle, wrapped in silk and coated with concern. "You always wear things that hug your body," he'd say while watching me get ready. "Don't you think something looser would be more elegant?" Elegant. That word hung in the air like perfume I never wore. Once I came home from drinks with friends, buzzing from laughter and wine, and he greeted me with a flat, "You still hang out with them?" No explanation, just judgment folded neatly into a question. He started calling it helping me make better choices, helping me be more polished, more refined, less loud. He never said less you, but I heard it in every critique. The clothes, the music I played, the books I read. Even the way I laughed. He'd wince sometimes, like joy had a volume he couldn't tolerate anymore. The distance crept in like fog, thick and cold. We stopped having sex regularly. When we did, it felt rehearsed, like checking a box. His hands used to know me like scripture, every curve, every sigh. But now they moved with obligation, not desire. He never looked into my eyes anymore, always somewhere else, like I was too familiar to excite him and too inconvenient to fix. I tried. God, I tried. I planned little things, weekend getaways, home-cooked dinners, stupid game nights with just the two of us. I bought him a new sketch pad because I remembered him once saying he missed drawing. He never opened it. It sat on the coffee table for weeks like an unanswered question. I brought things up gently, hoping not to provoke, not to make it worse. "Is everything okay with us?" I asked one night while we lay in bed, our bodies turned away from each other like magnets flipped the wrong way. He sighed, pulled the blanket tighter, and muttered, "You're always looking for problems." That was the worst part, not the silence, not the coldness, but the way he made me feel needy for wanting connection. Like love was supposed to, be low maintenance and quiet, and anything else was exhausting. I began second-guessing myself. Maybe I was too emotional, too sensitive, too much. But the truth is, I was just the only one still trying. He had already started checking out. I could feel it in the way he kissed me. Quick, dry, like a period at the end of a sentence we were no longer writing together. I kept showing up, hoping for a sign he still saw me. But every day, I felt more like a ghost in my own home. And ghosts don't cry. They just haunt. The bar pulsed with a kind of heat that had nothing to do with the weather. It was the kind of place where bodies swayed without shame, where glitter caught the dim lights like constellations, and no one blinked twice at a boy in heels or a girl in a tux. The music throbbed through the floor, a heartbeat louder than my own, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. I had come alone, wrapped in that red dress he hated. It clung to me like confidence, even though I felt like I was still learning how to wear it. The bartender gave me a once-over and smiled as they slid me a drink, vodka soda, just the right amount of lime. I perched at the bar, pretending not to scan the room, pretending I wasn't hoping for something, anything, to distract me from the weight I carried. That's when I saw him. He was leaning against the far end of the bar, a drink in one hand, the other tucked casually into the pocket of a tailored blazer. There was something effortless about him. Not just the way he dressed, though God, he looked sharp, but the way he watched the room. Not hunting, just observing. Curious. Our eyes met, and he smiled. Not the kind of smile that expects anything, just warm, knowing. I looked away, pretending to sip, pretending not to notice the way my stomach tightened. A few minutes later, he was beside me. "Is that dress a warning or an invitation?" he asked, voice low and teasing. I laughed, surprised at how easily it escaped me. "Depends on the night." "Well," he said, lifting his glass, "here's to finding out." We talked. About nothing, about everything. His name was Luca. He loved old movies, hated small talk, and had a habit of fiddling with his ring when he was nervous. I noticed because I couldn't stop watching him. He listened like it mattered, like I mattered. And he said things that made me laugh. Not polite chuckles, but actual laughter. The kind I hadn't heard from myself in too long. When his hand brushed mine on the bar, I didn't pull away. There was a rhythm to our conversation, like dancing. Without music. Flirting that danced on the edge of something deeper. He didn't ask about my relationship status, and I didn't offer it. But I saw the way his eyes flicked to my lips when I spoke. The way his gaze lingered just long enough. I told myself it was harmless. That I just needed to feel wanted. That there was nothing wrong with talking. With laughing. With letting someone look at me like I was art instead of obligation. But there was a moment. When he leaned in, close enough that I could smell the citrus on his breath, feel the warmth of his skin, that I felt the crack in my resolve. I pulled back just slightly, enough for him to notice. "You okay?" he asked, voice softer now. "I don't know," I admitted. "I think I forgot what this feels like." He didn't press, just smiled again, gently this time, and said, "Well, now you remember." I stayed a little longer. We didn't kiss. We didn't exchange numbers. But when I walked out into the night, cheeks flushed and heart beating loud in my chest, I realized something I hadn't in a long time. I missed being seen, and he saw me. The apartment was quiet when I walked in. Not peaceful, just the kind of silence that waits, thick and loaded. He was on the couch, scrolling through his phone like I hadn't just been gone for hours, like he hadn't noticed at all. "I want to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He didn't look up. "Now?" "Yes, now." A beat passed. He sighed like I was asking for something unreasonable, tossed the phone aside with the flair of someone already annoyed. "What is it this time?" That hit harder than I expected. This time. Like wanting connection was a recurring offense. I stood there, still in the red dress, heels in hand, mascara probably smudged from the night air. I suddenly felt ridiculous. But I pushed through. "Do you even see me anymore?" I asked. "Do you care? Because I feel like I've been screaming inside and you don't even flinch." He scoffed. "God, you're so dramatic." My chest tightened. "All you do is fish for attention," he continued. "You dress like that." His eyes flicked down at me, cold and biting, and act surprised when people look. "It's like you need everyone to want you." "I needed you to want me," I shot back. "But I guess that's too much to ask now." Something shifted then. The last of the politeness dropped. His jaw clenched, and he stood up, suddenly taller, louder. "You are too much. Everything has to be a performance with you. A moment. A meltdown. It's exhausting." The words didn't just hurt, they buried themselves. I stood there, stunned, blinking back tears that refused to fall. Just yet. My hands shook as I walked past him, into the bedroom. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe something to hold on to. Maybe the last piece of evidence I needed to stop blaming myself. His laptop was open. I wasn't even subtle. I clicked. Messages. Photos. A name I didn't recognize. Repeated over and over in chats that buzzed with desire, with intimacy I hadn't felt in months. "Can't wait to see you again. Wish you were here tonight. He's boring, always so emotional." I couldn't breathe. My legs carried me to the bathroom before I even realized I was moving. The water was already running before I was fully undressed, and then I was under it, letting the heat scald away the numbness. I didn't sob, not at first. It was just this tight, ugly sound that broke out of me, half gasp, half ache. My hands pressed to the tile as the water soaked my hair, my skin, everything. And still, it wasn't enough to wash him off. I cried, until my knees gave out, until my throat was raw, until all I could do was curl into myself under the stream. Somewhere between the tears and the steam, I whispered, "I wasn't too much. You were never enough." And even though no one heard it, I knew it was true. I didn't sleep. After the shower, I sat on the edge of the bed wrapped in a towel, hair dripping onto my shoulders, staring at the suitcase I hadn't touched in over a year. I pulled it from the closet slowly, like it might scream if I moved. Too fast. There wasn't even a plan, just the raw, aching need to not be there anymore. To get out before I collapsed entirely. I packed quietly. 1 pair of jeans, 3 shirts, toothbrush, cologne, my journal. The red dress, still damp from my tears, went in last. He was asleep on the couch or pretending to be. I didn't look at him when I passed. I didn't owe him anything anymore. Not a goodbye, not a confrontation, just distance. The city felt different at dawn, pale and tender, like it understood what I needed. I booked a hotel 2 neighborhoods away, something cozy and anonymous, where the receptionist didn't ask why I was checking in with swollen eyes and no return date. The room was small but warm. I kicked off my shoes and sank into the bed, burying my face in the clean sheets. It was the first time I'd felt safe in weeks, maybe months. For a while, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting it settle, letting the silence feel soft instead of suffocating. Then I reached for my journal, the one I hadn't touched since we were still good, and let the ink bleed every broken thing I had been holding in. Words spilled out, some angry, some desperate, some grieving the version of him I still missed even now. I thought about our first kiss, how he cupped my face like I was something precious, how he whispered things like promises. But remembering that now only made my stomach twist. Those moments were still beautiful. But now they belonged to someone who betrayed them. I flipped the pages slowly, unsure of what I was searching for. And then I remembered his scarf. His, not my partner's. Luca's. The bar. The citrus warmth of his voice. The way he looked at me like I was still someone worth noticing. I hadn't thought about him since the fight. Since the crash. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of the fog. Unknown number. I hesitated, thumb hovering, then I opened it. "Hey, just wondering. You okay?" No name, no signature, but I knew exactly who it was. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. Not because everything was better, but because someone, somewhere, still cared enough to ask. We met at the same bar, though it felt different this time. Less crowded, less chaotic. Like the universe dialed it down just for us. I wore a simple black shirt and jeans, no red dress, no performance, just me. He was already there when I walked, perched at the same spot at the bar, sipping something golden. He looked up, and when our eyes met, he smiled. Not the flirty kind, the soft, relieved kind, the "you're here" kind. "I almost thought you wouldn't come," he said as I slid into the seat beside him. I almost didn't, I admitted. He didn't push, just nodded and raised his glass slightly. To second chances of any kind. We drank, talked, laughed, the kind of laughter that loosened something deep in my chest. He told me about a childhood dog named Pickle who used to steal socks from guests, and I told him about the time I got kicked out of a gay club for accidentally setting off the smoke alarm with a fog machine I thought was decoration. It was easy. Honest. And I'd forgotten how much that mattered, how much it healed. To be seen without being judged, touched without being calculated. Eventually, the conversation slowed, turned quieter. I told him the truth. Not every detail, but enough. The distance, the gaslighting, the cheating. He didn't react with pity or outrage, just sat with me in it, hands folded around his glass like he was holding the weight of it too. "I'm Sorry, he said finally. Not just for what he did, but that you kept trying anyway. That's the kind of heartbreak that lingers. I blinked, surprised at how deeply that hit. I'd heard sympathy from friends, had gotten the usual you, deserve better speeches. But this was different. This felt like being understood. We left the bar without saying where we were going. We both knew. His apartment was small but warm, filled with mismatched books and old records. A cat named Moon blinked at me lazily from the armchair before resuming her nap. In the bedroom, we didn't rush. There was no frantic grabbing, no trying to forget someone else. It was quiet and slow, fingers that asked before taking, kisses that lingered in places no one had touched in ages. He kept whispering, "You're okay," like a mantra, like he was trying to convince me and himself at the same time. When we lay tangled together after, his chest against my back, one arm draped over my waist, I didn't feel dirty or guilty or unsure. Felt like myself again. We didn't talk much that night, just shared the stillness. He traced lazy circles on my skin with his fingertips, and I closed my eyes, letting go. Of the apartment I'd left behind, the version of love that had broken me, the parts of myself I'd buried to keep someone else comfortable. For the first time in so long, I didn't feel like too much. I just felt right. Time moved differently after that night. Slower, softer. Like life had taken a breath with me and decided not to rush things anymore. I stayed in the hotel for 2 more nights before moving into a temporary sublet a friend offered me. It was small and had terrible lighting, but it was mine. No quiet resentment hanging in the air. No eyes judging me from across the room. Just space. I started therapy, finally. Sat across from a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes who didn't flinch when I said things like, "I think I forgot who I was trying to please him." She gave me tools, words, the kind that stick to your ribs and feed you when the self-doubt creeps in at night. I joined a gym, not for revenge, not for a glow-up to show him what he lost, but for me, for the part of me that missed feeling strong, in my body. I started running. Nothing heroic, just small bursts. At first, I couldn't go 5 minutes without gasping. But a month later, I was pushing 30. And smiling. Work noticed. My boss pulled me into her office one afternoon and said, "You've been on fire lately. Focused. Clear." I smiled, genuinely, and for once I believed it. I pitched a project I'd shelved months ago, an LGBTQ+ youth mentoring initiative, and they greenlit it immediately. Purpose returned like it had just been waiting for me to show up. I cut my hair, bought new clothes. Not to become someone else, but to finally dress like the person I'd always been underneath the second guessing. Bold colors, sharp silhouettes, things that made me feel visible again. And yes, the red dress. I wore it to brunch with friends, to gallery openings. Once, I wore it just to go for a solo walk in the sun because it was hanging in my closet like a quiet dare. One afternoon, standing in front of my mirror, smoothing the fabric over my hips, I caught my reflection and smiled. "That dress?" I said to myself. "I wear it all the time now." Because now, it wasn't about rebellion. It wasn't about him or any version of me that had begged to be loved the right way. Now, it was about freedom, confidence, the undeniable joy of looking in the mirror and thinking, "Damn, I love who I see." He texted once, some weak apology wrapped in nostalgia. I didn't answer. Luca and I talked here and there, casual, kind. We weren't anything official, and maybe we wouldn't be. But what mattered was that he had helped me remember what it felt like to be treated gently, with care, like I mattered. But most of all, I helped myself. I showed up for the version of me that had been ignored, quieted, and made small. And I promised never to disappear again. We met again on a Thursday. It wasn't planned. I had been walking past the bar on my way back from a bookstore, the bag heavy with poetry I hadn't made time to read, when I saw him through the window. Luca. Same bar stool, same effortless posture. He looked up, and I could tell the recognition hit him a second before it hit me. He smiled. Wide, real, and stood without hesitation, opening the door from the inside as I approached. Fate or coincidence? He asked. I laughed. Either way, I'm not mad about it. He didn't ask questions, just motioned for the bartender and ordered me a drink before I could even sit down. Vodka soda, extra lime. He remembered. It felt easy again, like our last conversation had only paused for a moment. We picked up where we left off. Books, music, childhood quirks, the ridiculous ways we self-sabotage when we're scared of being seen. There was no pressure, no edge, just air. And I could finally breathe. At one point, I told him about the breakup. Not everything, but enough. I talked about the slow erosion, the constant second-guessing, the loneliness of lying next to someone who made me feel like I was always one sentence away from being too much. I stayed too long, I said quietly, stirring the melting ice in my glass. Luca didn't flinch, didn't interrupt. He nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of his drink like he was grounding himself in the moment. We've all overstayed in the wrong places, he said. But you left. That's the part that matters. I looked at him then. Really looked. He wasn't perfect, and he didn't pretend to be. But his presence felt like a room with open windows. A place where I didn't have to shrink to fit. When he brushed his hand against mine later, I didn't pull away. His place was nearby. We walked slowly, our fingers grazing more intentionally this time. There was no rush, no games, just the quiet hum of potential. Inside, everything unfolded gently. No urgency, just exploration. Hands that lingered, kisses that deepened gradually, like they were earning trust. He didn't ask what I needed. He just listened to my body, my breath, the soft yes I whispered against his collarbone. And when we finally moved together, it didn't feel like something I needed to apologize for. It wasn't a distraction or a mistake. It was healing. It was warmth returning to parts of me I'd forgotten. Afterward, we lay tangled in his sheets, skin warm, silence thick but not heavy. I don't usually do this, I said, barely above a whisper. I know, he replied. Me neither. I rolled to face him. His eyes were soft in the dark, a trace of a smile still tugging at his mouth. Thank you, I said. For what? For not making me feel like I was broken? He reached up, brushing a thumb across my cheek like he was wiping something away. You're not, he said. You just forgot. And in that moment, I believed him. Not because I needed to, but because something inside me had already started remembering. I moved differently after that night. Slower, softer. Like life had taken a breath with me and decided not to rush things anymore. I stayed in the hotel for 2 more nights before moving into a temporary sublet a friend offered me. It was small and had terrible lighting, but it was mine. No quiet resentment hanging in the air. No eyes judging me from across the room. Just space. I started therapy. Finally. Sat across from a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes who didn't flinch when I said things like, I think I forgot who I was trying to please him. She gave me tools, words, the kind that stick to your ribs and feed you when the self-doubt creeps in at night. I joined a gym, not for revenge, not for a glow-up to show him what he lost, but for me. For the part of me that missed feeling strong. In my body, I started running. Nothing heroic, just small bursts. At first, I couldn't go 5 minutes without gasping. But a month later, I was pushing 30 and smiling. Work noticed. My boss pulled me into her office one afternoon and said, You've been on fire lately, focused, clear. I smiled, genuinely, and for once, I believed it. I pitched a project I'd shelved months ago, an LGBTQ+ youth mentoring initiative, and they greenlit it immediately. Purpose returned like it had just been waiting for me to show up. I cut my hair, bought new clothes, not to become someone else, but to finally dress like the person I'd always been underneath the second guessing. Bold colors, sharp silhouettes, things that made me feel visible again. And yes, the red dress. I wore it to brunch with friends, to gallery openings. Once, I wore it just to go for a solo walk in the sun because it was hanging in my closet like a quiet dare. One afternoon, standing in front of my mirror, smoothing the fabric over my hips, I caught my reflection and smiled. That dress? I said to myself. I wear it all the time now. Because now it wasn't about rebellion. It wasn't about him or any version of me that had begged to be loved the right way. Now it was about freedom, confidence, the undeniable joy of looking in the mirror and thinking, damn, I love who I see. He texted once. Some weak apology wrapped in nostalgia. I didn't answer. Luca and I talked here and there, casual, kind. We weren't anything official, and maybe we wouldn't be. But what mattered was that he had helped me remember what it felt like to be treated gently, with care, like I mattered. But most of all, I helped myself. I showed up for the version of me that had been ignored, quieted, and made small, and I promised never to disappear again. Weeks passed. I saw Luca a few more times, each meeting softer than the last. We talked, laughed, and explored the spaces between us. But it wasn't rushed. It wasn't frantic. It was grounded, like the foundation we were building was made, of something stronger than need or expectation. We both had our histories, our scars. I had learned that love wasn't always grand gestures, the swoon-worthy moments painted in fairy tales. Sometimes love was the quiet conversations over coffee, the gentle touch on your shoulder, the acceptance of each other's flaws. We didn't need to be perfect. We just needed to be real. We took our time, no promises, no rush. Just two people learning to trust again, taking turns to show the parts of ourselves we were still figuring out. The ones that were raw, and the ones that were whole. It was on a rainy afternoon when we walked through a park, his hand tucked into mine, that I felt the last of my walls crumble. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. His presence was enough, and my own was enough for him. It felt like we were two pieces of the same puzzle, different, but somehow fitting. Perfectly. You know, he said, glancing over at me with a small smile. I never thought I'd meet someone who made me feel like I was enough just as I am. I looked at him, surprised by the raw honesty in his voice. I know what you mean. I think I forgot that I was enough. I think we're both learning it, he replied softly. And that was when I understood. I had spent so much time giving pieces of myself away, bending until I felt like I was someone else, someone who wasn't enough. But in the space with Luca, I didn't have to shrink. I could just be. We spent that afternoon lost in conversation, exploring everything from the books we loved to the kind of love we thought we deserved. Slowly, like a slow burn that doesn't scorch but warms, I realized something important. Healing wasn't just about moving on. It was about becoming more of who I was meant to be, regardless of who stayed or who left. By the time we parted ways that night, I was different. And it wasn't because Luca had fixed me or because everything had fallen perfectly into place. It was because, for the first time in a long time, I had learned to be my own home. Love, I realized, wasn't about finding someone who made everything perfect. It was about finding someone who made me feel worthy of love again. Not because of who they were or how they saw me, but because I was learning to see myself again. And so I walked away from the past, knowing the journey wasn't over. But that was okay, because now I knew something profound. Love was still possible. For me. For anyone. For all of us.